literally an 80-degree difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just, so I'm from New Orleans in that area. I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. And I was just listening, I listened to WTIX, which is a provider. What's your name? And yeah, I was listening, it's gonna be 78 today, and I mean, partly cloudy and cold, it's gonna be 56. Jeez. Okay. We'll talk about finishing up on channel intensity. We'll talk about a little bit about channel type. And we'll finish with dual distribution and closing channel gaps on Tuesday. And then we'll be ready for the next test. Thank you.
Awesome.
Right. So we finished talking about the channel intensity decisions, but when I first drew that thing on Tuesday where I showed that manufacturers and consumers have the same ideas, is that they want to be able to sell as many as they possibly can. Well, that's true, but there's so many other reasons why a manufacturer has to think about how they actually come up with their intensity decisions. Once again, remember this, it's always going to be what is the best return on investment, and that's the reason that you make choices. So whether to have it in as many possible places as possible or only a few, all comes down to what brings the best return on inventory. And so these are 8 critical decisions or factors that should be considered when a manufacturer is doing a decision on intensity. Okay. So the first one, believe it or not, is not necessarily having anything to do about deciding how to be able to distribute in terms of total depth, but one of them is just what is the best way to reward our partners. And so if I only have a small set of channel members and the intra-brand competition, remember that's the same product that's being sold by 2 or 3 different distributors. If the intra-brand competition is low, then you're granting one of those channel members or more than one of those members a very substantial power. They have control in those particular trade areas, and that might be a good thing. If I want to be known as Select or Unique, I might consider Mass General Store or Footlocker as being one of those groups that, I think can maximize that. They can sell better, and you give them that power. That's a good reason why. However, if you're in a large area, let's say you're in Hickory where there's 300,000 people in the trade area, then you might want to maximize it by having 3 or 4 really good competitors. And what that does for you is, for one thing, it spreads out the load. It encourages shopping. And if you are a shopping type of item, then you want people to shop. It also means between the players in that given trade area that nobody is going to sleep, that everybody's trying that day to do the best they can. Now, we had something of a quasi-monopoly when I was in Lafayette for Mitsubishi televisions, but we also had a new generation that was right outside the city limits that could offer that 10% less than we could. Well, we couldn't get complacent. We had to think and be able to really engage the consumer to be able to grab them. And so the first factor is you do want competition. I think if Starbucks can solve their issues, I think one of the main reasons why is that you have some really good competitors that make some pretty decent coffee and can get it out in 15 minutes or less. And because most of us just want a good cup of coffee. And so we need our competitors to keep us from being too relaxed about the way we are. Once again, especially if the good requires shopping in order to succeed. And so the example they have here is Best Buy bought a smaller company called Future Shop. And so what they did is that they left both names in both stores in place so that they could, in essence, compete against each other. I've always said what Starbucks needs to do is spin off a company for your generation, a Gen Alpha group. I mean, Starbucks is my generation, if you really want to think about it. They could make a younger, edgier group, more thinking about your particular age category, and they could compete against themselves. And I feel like that's a way to make it better. And besides, it just increases the market share that the overall Starbucks corporation would have. So that's why you look at reducing complacency. The next is, what product categories are we talking about? So if we think about going to our principles of marketing, we actually know that products are not the same. No kidding, okay? So in 1923, we came out with product categories. And this was the first real substantial spinoff of marketing from economics, which is where we came from. And it recognized that going to market required things that were different and unique. And so we came up with these product categories. It was expanded in 1976 to include unsought goods, but these are the categories in order: convenience, shopping, specialty, and then the last is unsought. Okay. So the first category of convenience, it has several things in it. Convenience are goods like staples. Staples are goods we shop every day. And these tend to things that we need every day: milk, eggs, bread, all in those given categories. So those are staples. Those are goods that need to be in the closest place possible. And if for these product categories, okay, the channel strategies convenience is an intensive distribution. Okay, we push those into as many places as possible. So convenience goods are those that should be distributed intensively in the closest reasonable location. Along with staples, you also have emergency items. These are items like umbrellas, or like today, where you need a good warm set of gloves. And then along with convenience, there's also what are known as fast-moving consumer goods, or FMCG. Now, fast-moving consumer goods tends to be a really unique category because it kind of crosses not only what we might consider to be shopping goods, but also convenience goods as well. These are goods that are sold fast, that have limited shelf time and limited shelf lives as well, but they cross an entire different categories that makes them open for more than just thinking in an intensive distribution is what they still are in that category. But an example of this might be frozen foods, especially if you're in the category of kids like I have, where it's frozen chicken or frozen corn dogs. That's a fast-moving consumer good, but it could be office supplies. It could be a ream of paper, which is 500 sheets. Fast-moving consumer goods is a unique product category that's kind of separate from what we might consider convenient items, which are the closest convenient place. But you kind of get what I'm saying when I'm going through this, okay? So, convenience items, staples, emergency goods, and fast-moving consumer goods. Those are the product categories where you want intensive distribution. The next is shopping goods. And shopping goods prompt comparison. Usually these are goods that are more complex. And by what I mean by that is they require a more extensive thought process to decide whether or not you're going to buy those items. Shopping goods encourage more than one brand. There's the expectation of both intra and inter-brand competition in a shopping item. And so what it means is in a shopping good, we are going to do selective distribution. And so with a shopping item, we are concerned what stores in the given trade area are there because we do want to be compared with competitors. It is no surprise that automobile dealerships cluster around each other. I mean, there's more reasons than that. Generally, they're outside of the city, and when they're outside of the city, it means that the city can't collect taxes on them. That's why they're outside. But there are other ways that the city will ding them, especially when it comes to services. So, shopping goods encourage selective distribution. Specialty goods are those goods that consumers will seek out, that they are so unique that consumers are willing to travel to where the goods are. And so this is exclusive distribution. And what exclusive distribution means is because of the uniqueness of the product itself draws a natural group of individuals. So it means that we can invest a little bit more in just one dealership in a given trade area. It also might be by the very nature of that one particular store that it will draw consumers as well. And so what you will find is that manufacturers are drawn to exclusive stores if there's something special and unique about their product. Also, once again, if there's something special enough and unique about the product that requires another level of service. And so the last is unsought goods. And it is exactly what it sounds like is consumers don't seek it, but they need it. And they can be exclusively or selectively distributed But generally, you don't have to worry about that. I'm just kind of completing the category loop. So unsought goods, insurance, burial plots. You don't seek them, but you need them. So if you're, my mother after 2004, so Katrina came and she lost everything. She lived in New Orleans and then she moved away. And part of the settlement, this is true story, part of the settlement is that my mother bought a burial plot in where I grew up, which is Long Beach, Mississippi. And it's on the Gulf Coast, small town. And I talking to her and she said, well, I said, well, that's kind of nice, Mom. I'm glad you have it. And she said, oh, and I bought one for you, and I bought one for your brother, and I bought one for your sister. And I was about to say something, but I thought, you know what? That gave my mother a lot of comfort to know that if I don't have anywhere else to go, I mean, I have a burial plot. So what do you say to your mom? I said, thank you. You know, who knows? You know, maybe I'll use it. I'll have my own tombstone though. So product categories, number 2. The next is, this goes back to premium positioning, all right? And this is also exclusivity, so I'm kind of rounding the loop here, all right? Is that consumers or manufacturers want to signal the superior abilities and the special functions of their particular goods, which justify a premium price. And realize this is that scarcity is a big positioning statement for high quality. They deliberately withhold it because the expectation that if a good is unique, it is also rare. It is a heuristic that we as human beings do. Now, you might combine selective distribution with restrictions, which is pretty much what Steel Tools is. They have a selective distribution policy, but have very restrictive contracts because for them, service and support and conduct in the use of Steel Tools values it as a premium brand. But if I'm talking about premium positioning, I'm thinking things like Omega watches and anything in terms of luxury items. There are definite reasons why they minimize the market for Longines is because that increases value. You know, the truth is that there are a lot of diamonds out there, so many diamonds that they do not necessarily reserve a premium price, but there's only one corporation in the world that works with diamonds, it's De Beers. And so De Beers controls the flow of diamonds in the world, and that does make them unique. Okay. Now, the last is niche brands, okay, is that when you have a very narrow specialized group of buyers, you can be selective or intensive in whatever way you want, as long as it signals some kind of uniqueness. So niche strategies usually are selective or exclusive, depending on the brand. I can give you an example of this is knitting. And so any production of cloth goods or goods that like quilts, that is a very niche brand. And yet, depending on the size, you might have 2 vendors in a big trade area like Hickory. But rarely do you find it like in Boone where you actually have 2, which you have Michael's and then you have Hobby Lobby. So niche brand positioning, it can be selective or it can be exclusive. But if you break those down, these are the niches or the groups when we're talking about products, you can understand what kind of channel strategy they have. Here is one of those things, as I talked about initially when it came to channel intensity decisions, is how much power do I want to be able to invoke in my supplier group? And one of the powers that I have is rewards. One of the rewards for it to a particular group might be that I would say, okay, I'm willing to select you as a vendor, but it's a big reward, but it also allows the manufacturer to have much greater influence. When it's a huge channel where everybody, this particular item is accessed through any of the vendors, it's difficult for the manufacturers to influence those particular items. When Apple came out with the iPhone, for 3 years, the iPhone was the exclusive rights to sell them in the United States was to AT&T for 3 years. And there was 2 reasons for that. Well, one of them is AT&T made them an offer they couldn't refuse. The other is quite simply is Apple wanted to have extreme selective control in the way that the iPhone was initially distributed, and especially when it came to product warranties. They wanted, that's Apple. They want that kind of control from the very beginning, and AT&T was very willing to be the exclusive buyer for the first 3 years. So instead of intensive distribution, which basically creates an army of ineffectual dealers who don't really care, by limiting the number, basically what you do is you reward the downstream partners, but you also have a very significant influence over them. You can offer greater rewards, you can have greater influence. And by the way, this also excludes beyond just whether or not they're in any different product category. Because certainly the iPhone was a shopping good when it came in, when it was in the group of smartphones, but because of the way they wanted it treated, it became an exclusive item, just one vendor. Okay, channeled influence number 4. So, along with the balancing of power, the inverse of that is true, and that is balancing dependence. And so one of the things that we talk about is that in channel environments, you have independent companies with their own mission statements and their own reasons for existence, but there has to be some kind of effective way to create some kind of influence on each other because you need each other. The interdependence is as vital to success as anything else is. I wish to establish a stable relationship. And one of the ways I can do it is quite simply make it unprofitable for either side to exploit each other. Once again, we're talking about the golden handcuffs. Mutual dependence, if we can write it in contracts where there are long-term rewards of staying together, and yes, punishments if we lose each other, is one of those things that can be balanced. We want to be able to reassure channel partners that our commitment is enduring and that we maximize our coverage with strong groups. Good manufacturers to balance dependence will not try to maximize coverage by bringing out their own manufacturers. So in the 80s, when I was at Omni Computer Store, we wanted to start reselling Hewlett-Packard computers because they were also well connected in terms of scientific equipment. Well, the problem with Hewlett-Packard is that we were not just their exclusive dealer, and as a matter of fact, corporates started selling the goods to some of our customers, and this is the danger of dual distribution. We want them to refrain from maximizing coverage by allowing us to do our jobs. And if you trade that exclusivity and the territory, we will have a longer term. So one of the reasons that App State definitely wanted to be into Hickory was they wanted to expand their trade area to be able to sell too. Now, the Hickory area is pretty interesting. The 6 counties there have a total population of 330,000. That is a huge trade area. And the central thing also about it is it's the only trade area in North Carolina that did not have a 4-year university. There are someone assigned to it. So the race to Hickory was done by us, and of course, they have Lenore Ryan there, but into a full-featured 4-year university. That's kind of what we were doing. And this is what's called opportunity cost. How competitive is the trade area itself? I may be a manufacturer who wants to get my goods into Hickory, even though it is intensely competitive, and I may not be earning great profits because I want to be in the market. The market is extremely important for my success. If I'm a downstream partner, let's say I'm in electronics, I don't want to limit the brand, especially if that category is extremely important. If I'm an independent seller of, let's say, televisions in Hickory, I want 20 brands, maybe more. Because that single category is extremely important. It's the same thing about Best Buy. You know, Best Buy wants as many as it can because that assortment is more important to it than making major money off of any single brand. And if I'm a downstream independent dealer, I can't expect to have exclusivity. It's just the nature of the area. And what opportunity costs, remember what it means is, what is the cost I give up if I'm not there? That's what an opportunity cost means. And why I may not make a lot of money in Hickory, the fact that I'm there is valuable to me, especially when it comes to going into other trade areas. I may make 0.5% or 2%, but just because it's in an area that's growing, I want to be part of that group. And so that's what opportunity cost means. So also the transaction cost, quite simply, of being in perhaps Hickory. It's less expensive to be in a big area, especially if I attach myself with what's called a master distributor. And so what can happen is if I go to an area like Hickory, and there may be 14 potential distributors of my given product, who am I going to select? What I might want to do is select the top of the tree. And that one individual, instead of the 14 others, may give me advantages because, once again, I do not have 14 different corporations that I have to negotiate with, get to prices with, distribute with. I have that one vendor that I can count on. I lower my transaction cost by choosing one versus multiple ones. And this is the other thing that Apple got when it started to distribute through just AT&T. But I have that one set of big shoulders that is going to be able to take care of all my problems. That's what a master distributor will do. I might be able to distribute, who knows, 20% more if I went to all the remaining dealers. But then again, I might reduce my opportunity cost by 2/3 or transaction cost by 2/3 by just having one distributor. And here, once again, is what maximizes return on investment. It's the question. How do I maximize my ROI, excuse me? And then there are other reasons why you distribute. Sometimes you want to ignore everything, and what you want to do is you want to brand build. And so one of the things you will do is you will intensively distribute in many locations, come up with many kinds of selling opportunities. Basically, so your brand gets sold more places. And I can tolerate a lot of intra-brand competition and refrain from bait and switch because I want to be able to build as fast as I can. Now, it says fast-moving consumer goods may be the best place for this, and I would agree. You're talking about those goods that move quickly. And so if I brand build and sales promote in that particular line, I can maximize my revenues pretty quickly. And so brand building, hopefully what you do is you change end users' preferences. In sales promotion, it doesn't always work. But if you're defined and you're wanting to build your brand, you're going to do it in as many places as you possibly can. Mountain Dew did this to great success when they repositioned in the 90s, and they've stayed within the number 3 and number 4 brands for soft drinks. Okay, you know what? My voice is tired. I think I'm done for the day. We will come back. We'll talk about dual distribution, or channel type decisions. We'll talk about dual distribution. And then we'll talk about how to close gaps, and then we'll be done. And then we'll have our next test the Thursday after we come back from spring break. Okay? All right, folks. Go have a good spring break. See you later.